We're joined this morning by Ifunanya Nduka, who, of course, is sharing with us this morning concerns concerning young Nigerians. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. If you could do a top two issues for the average young Nigerian, what are two things that you would point out?
Hunger and unemployment.
How much worse has it gotten?
So I can't put numbers to it, but I can say it has definitely gotten a lot worse. A whole lot worse, because it's hard to put food on the table. It's hard to move from one place to another, and then there is hardly any job for young people to also, generate income for themselves. So I cannot necessarily put numbers, but I can tell you that definitely it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, the unemployment figures are currently 5.3%. Even if many people disagree with the NBS for this new metric.
Absolutely, I disagree with this as well.
So you would argue that it's a lot worse?
Yes, it is a lot worse. It's absolutely.
Do you see, because we repeatedly have arguments as to whether young Nigerians should be patient or not. The current administration repeatedly says the same thing. There's almost nothing new that they say aside the temporary pains, be patient, things will get better. Nigeria needs to do these surgical procedures on our economy. Why isn't that convincing enough for the average young Nigerian?
Because so we've moved from this particular government the last 8 years before a new person came in, still with the political party, and it's the same thing that has been said, right? Assuming the new government was coming in and saying something like, things are going to be hard when we come in. We're going to have to manage XYZ thing for XYZ number of years. That would have made more sense. But it came in with a lot of promises, renewed hope, and then we're hearing be patient, be patient. That is not what we want to hear, because that was not the precedence that they gave us when they were coming. So it's hard to say continue. It's hard to ask people to continue being patient, right? When you didn't come with that story when you were vying for the office of president. So people hardly want to listen to be patient, because the people in occupying certain public offices it doesn't even seem like they understand our plight, because we can see incredible, absurd amounts of money that they are enjoying for allowance, and then they're asking us to be patient. I mean, if you're asking us to be patient, can we at least see you do certain things that make us understand that you understand our plight, and we can actually be patient, that you're cutting down certain costs on your own end that will also impact the general economy? Because when you see some figures, some numbers from the House of Reps, the National Assembly, it's just very annoying.
All right. I mean, you're the COO for ReadyToLead Africa, and there are conversations around what Nigeria's predicament simply is. It's about leadership. What can you talk or say about leadership process, especially here in Nigeria, when it comes to those who are decision makers, especially for a nation that we have about 200 and something million of Nigerians?
Okay. When you say leadership process, can you?
I mean, the leaders, do you think, what do you think about them? What do you think they're doing? What do you think they're not doing right? What do you think the problem really is?
Okay, so I think a primary problem is implementation. So they are very interesting policies. They are very interesting things that are on paper. But then when it comes to implementation, it's a problem. And we could come for 1,000,001 meetings, summits, conferences, youth conference. Like the president said, we're going to have one, confab. And it seems like you come, you point out things, you say things, but then they won't go back and implement what you have said. So that makes it seem like your voice is not being heard at the end of the day. So the leadership process in Nigeria, I don't think is empathetic, because the leaders it doesn't seem like they understand actually what people are going through. For example, here in Abuja, somebody stays in somewhere like Buhari, and the person has to go to work at central area, and you're spending about 2,000 naira just to get to work in the morning. And if you're staying in Buhari, you're probably staying there because house of rent is quite cheaper, right? And then it doesn't make any sense, because if you're unable to afford certain things, staying in the city center, you're going to stay in somewhere that a more rural area that you'll be able to get cheaper livelihood and source of living. Then you have to come to work every day spending so much. So I'm thinking, how is maybe sales girl in some place in central area able to afford 4,000 naira transportation every day, going to work and coming back. So the leadership process is very unempathetic. That is one. I also don't think they hear us. It seems like we can just keep speaking and they hear, but they don't listen. So, there's a difference between hearing and so they can hear you, of course, but they are not listening and they are also not communicating effectively. So that is a problem as well. So I think largely the leadership process in Nigeria is quite, unempathetic.
Do you expect more Nigerians to tap into the Japa syndrome?
Okay.
Or better still, are you thinking of Japa into?
Genuinely, no. Because I really love Nigeria. I think for the longest time, I've been one of those people that have this hope in Nigeria. And, I think a lot of us had hope in Nigeria before the last presidential general elections. And then somehow the hope kind of settled down and died down because of, everything that happened. But I still somehow have hope in Nigeria. And that's why I do the work that I do as well. So part of our work is also educating young people on the importance of, being involved in the democratic process and governance process of the country. And that is because I genuinely believe in the potential that we have as a people and in the potential that we have, in the country. Another thing that also made me not consider Japan is the great food that we have here. So I do not want to Japan. Personally, of course, I think it's important for people to go out there, gain, multiple diverse experiences, learn different cultures. But I think there is just something about home. I do not think a lot of people want to Japa, but then when push comes to shove, right, it almost seems like that's just the best option. I saw a tweet, I think a few days ago, where someone was saying, she regrets staying back because of her business. She had an opportunity to leave the country, but then she lets it slip away from her hands because she had a business that she was saying, I need to take care of this. And now all the policies, all the change in things have really incredibly affected her business. And now she's even regretting that decision. The business that she was trying to protect while staying here has crumbled in her hands and she's unable to leave. So it's like she's stuck. And comments on that tweet, a lot of people agreed with that. They regret not leaving the country. So it's hard. We want to stay back, but can we actually just enjoy staying back? Can it be safe? Can we, get some revenue from the work that we're doing? Do we have to work 5 jobs to just leave? Because an average person is not just doing one thing. I personally am not doing one thing. I do not know anybody that is doing one thing. You have to do multiple things. My dad looks at me and he's confused that I have to do so many things to just, because that's not his reality before now.
Yeah, but that's not peculiar to Nigeria. In many parts of the world, you also see people having multiple income streams because economies across the world, in many places it might be, also struggling. May not be as bad as the Nigerian situation, but it might be a little, tough here or there. So if you were going to, as the head of your organization, a part of your organization, if you're going to, advise young people. We're currently seeing a democratic process that not a lot of people can trust in, an electoral process that is also difficult, to trust. So if you're going to advising young people in Nigeria today, what would you say to convince them, aside the, quality of our food, what other things would you say to advise them to have some faith in the Nigerian journey?
That's a very interesting question. Do I want to even advise young people to have more faith in the journey? Because we've been saying the same thing for a very long time. We've been giving the same recommendations. We've been saying the same thing. In fact, after the last general elections, because of what happened with IREV, a lot of people were really disappointed with civil society organizations like ours because we went out on the street, we told people, look, this is different, come out, your vote will actually really count. And then we saw that the court said that IREV is, insignificant in the court of law, and that was very disheartening for a lot of people. So it's hard to actually tell people to stay back. And again, because of how things can just change almost immediately. So it really is hard to convince people to stay back. It's hard to convince people to stay. I don't think food is even enough to convince people to stay back in the country. It's almost like if you have whatever way you see to leave to save your head and save your family as well, and then come back. But I think from where I stand, if I were to say advice to young people, absolutely say that the country is ours. You know, we should stay and fix our country. We shouldn't leave it for the older people who have, you know, I mean, they probably have tried their best, and now their time is over. So it's our turn to make things right. And something that we should also pay attention to as young people is value orientation. We should be intentional about reshaping our culture, our mind, trying to, you know, understand that there are certain things that shouldn't be, you know, as young people. So I think that's what I was saying.
Finally, just to touch on this, the president in his October 1st speech called for 30 days youth confab. Just calling on youth, said everybody come together. I mean, just like a father will call on his children, you know, and a nighttime folklore storytelling. Say, you know what, I'm going to tell you a story of the past and so on, but I want us to come together. Come and tell me what your problem is. What do you think about that? 30 days. Are you going to be there?
So the president said he's going to consult certain youth organization leaders to, you know, recommend people to be in the room. So
look, you're ready to lead Africa. I mean, as a CEO, I'm sure ready to lead would take that challenge up, right?
Well, I mean, of course, if we're invited, because I do not know the people he will consult, and I don't know if that conversation has already started happening because I haven't heard anything on it after the October 1st speech that the president gave. So absolutely, if we're invited, 100%, we will be there as Ready to Lead Africa.
And do you think 30 days is, I mean, setting up a confab for 30 days would work, would change things?
It could change things. So that is the problem, right? So we have great policies, like I said earlier, but then the implementation. So we could come our opinions, you know, share what burdens our hearts, but then the president will hear, people will be taking down notes, we'll see a report on it, but are we going to see it being implemented? Are we going to see something being done? You know, it's hard to say. I want to be optimistic and say, okay, it's possible that we'll have some better implementations this time. But the 30 days confab, he wasn't very clear on whether it's going to be a stretch or one day in each state or something like that. But I don't think 30 days a stretch in one location will make it.
I mean, that's the thing. That for me is one of the, you know, interesting aspect of the questions, you know, that must be asked. The Nigerian Economic Summit has pulled together the thought leaders, heads of industry, ministers, the vice president, and it's happened for 3 days. What type of guy?
To calm the nerves, you know.
You know, these conversations, and it might happen across multiple states, across the 30 days.
You're saying that. I've told you that that's what
I said earlier. There was no clear communication on what that will look like, what the framework of that 30 days.
Very good. Anyway, Ifunanya Nduka, CEO, Ready to Lead Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for speaking up for the youth as well. I mean, we're on the other side of the divide. Remember, we need to just stay neutral and, of course, get as much as possible to get to hear from the likes of your personality and those who are talking about the current economic situation. So, thank you.